We're talking about how to start an LLC in Hawaii, and what you can see back here is a checklist that we're going to be running through of exactly how to do that. But before we get to that, and I'm casting this from my computer here, what I want to talk about first is how to avoid the LLC dumpster fire. And basically what that is the common pitfalls and mistakes people make when they're setting up their LLC that results in tens of thousands of dollars in legal damages down the line. And it starts because people don't have an understanding of terms such as piercing the corporate veil, commingling funds, registered agent, and pass-through taxation. And also, it's like after the LLC formation, like they don't know how the LLC renewal process works, or they don't look into business licenses and permits. To understand these things, what we're going to do is we're actually going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to talk about what your LLC actually does for your business, so that by the end of this video series, you understand all these things and you feel confident that you have your LLC set up, but it's also going to maintain what it's supposed to do for you, which is limiting your liability. What I want to do right here is talk about those two things. The fact that an LLC offers limited liability protection, and it also offers pass-through taxation. To make it a little bit easier, why don't we go through an example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC. What we have here is a sole proprietorship. This is the business owner right here, the sole prop. And he has his personal home, car, and bank account on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, he has his business assets, the physical location, the point of sale, the bank, the espresso machine, the lights. Everything currently is tied back to that business owner, which creates a lot of liability for them. This is just a bad situation to have. Now, what the business owner could do is own an LLC that owns the coffee shop. So this now looks very different. Now what we have is the business owner on the left-hand side with their personal assets, and on the right-hand side, we're calling it Acme Coffee LLC. So we have all those assets, but they exist underneath the LLC. The really important part is this red line, this division in the middle. This is something called the corporate veil. Now, if you recall earlier, we talked about a term called piercing the corporate veil. We're going to explain that right now through this term, which is commingling funds. Now, what commingling funds is let's say that you set this up and you have everything set up correctly, but you didn't set up a business bank account right away. So you ended up running business transactions through your personal bank account. That is something called commingling funds. The reason it's important is, let's say that you were to be sued. Somebody gets hurt at the coffee shop. What the attorney suing you is going to try to do is try to find cracks in your LLC. If they figure out that you've been commingling funds and they present the evidence to a judge, and the judge agrees with them, they may grant them permission to pierce the corporate veil. When that happens, this division in between your personal and business assets disappears, and that attorney suing you is going to be able to come after not just your business assets, but your personal assets as well, your personal car, home, and bank account. So that's why an LLC is so important to set up, but it's also just as important to understand it and know how to properly take care of it, and it's knowing things such as commingling funds. So the first lesson here is to set up a business bank account as soon as possible for your new business, so you're not commingling funds. Now, why don't we talk about an explanation of pass-through taxation? Here what we have is the business owner in the center here, and I wanted to make you aware that the IRS is not taxing the LLC. We have Acme Coffee LLC, and it grossed $140,000 and had $90,000 of expenses, leading to $50,000 in net income. That $50,000 in net income passes through to your personal tax returns. This is also called the flow-through taxation. So just know that you can use either of those terms interchangeably, but the IRS is going to be taxing you on your personal tax returns. Now, if you get into like corporations, that's where you end up having things such as K-1s, they're called, and it's an additional steps that you have to take. This is actually nice that this happens because this makes tax time a little bit easier. But I want to plant a seed right now. In the future, when your business is getting to around $50,000 in net income, that's when you can apply an S-Corp designation to your LLC to reduce your tax burden. Now, you're not going to be doing that day one. You want to wait till you get to about $40,000, $50,000 in net income. But again, this is one of those things I want to put on your radar so that you're doing what you need to do for your business and also optimize your LLC for yourself. Because I've seen a lot of people that get their LLC set up and don't know about this, and they miss out on a lot of potential tax savings. Now let's talk about actually the checklist of starting your LLC. Well, number one is you can get this checklist for yourself. There's going to be a QR code on the screen that you can scan that'll take you to this. It's a free checklist that you can get. And there's also a link in the description below, but it's more than just a checklist. There's actually some bonuses here. There's an AI chatbot that you can use that you can actually communicate with and ask it specific questions about your state. There's a free charitable opportunity if you want to give $20 to charity when you get your LLC set up. A yearly accounting calendar. We're going to talk about this, I believe, in the third video in this series. Super helpful to just understand these dates. And I know this seems like a lot when you're looking through this, but as we go through this video series, all this is going to make sense and you're going to feel so prepared for setting up your LLC. Free CPA advice, future tax savings, we're going to talk about all of that. Glossary of terms. Highly suggest you watch this video here. I've seen a lot of people that miss out on $200. They fall victim to these LLC scams that are pretty common. So all of that is included with this document as well. Now what we need to do is figure out which route you want to go. You can go through a state website, you can go through online LLC services, or you can go through a business attorney. For the sake of this video, we're going to go through the state site and file the articles of organization. But in the next video in the series, we're going to deep dive on which path is the right path for your situation. And I've seen people overspend by like $1,500. So it's really important that you check out that next video. But once you get started, you need to figure out what your business name is going to be for your LLC. What I'll say here is it doesn't have to be perfect. Like Acme Coffee LLC is a terrible name for a coffee shop, but what you can have is something called a DBA, or a fictitious business name. That is something where like you have Acme Coffee LLC, but then maybe the brand name is Espresso Yourself Cafe. If you set one of those up, I just wanted to make you aware of this because then your brand name doesn't necessarily have to be your LLC name. What is important is that the LLC name is unique. So there's a state directory list here. What we're going to do is we're going to open this up, go down to Hawaii, and this is where we have a business name search. If I did hula, right, this is probably going to be something where you're going to see a lot of hulas, and it says there's 300 entries, right? But if I were to go back and do a new search, and this time just kind of jam out on the keyboard and click search, now what you see is there's no businesses found matching your search. This is what we want to see, is this pop up here when you search your business name. Now, you may have to go for the, instead of begins with, it contains, you may want to toggle that and make sure that you have a unique business name. But once you do, then we can go into getting your LLC set up. Now, the first thing I wanted to make mention of is registering your LLC name. The reason I mention this is some people think if they register their LLC name, they're done. You're not. It's kind of like getting a domain. Like if you buy a domain address, you don't have a website, you just own a domain address. So when you register the LLC name, you own the LLC name, but you actually haven't filed the articles of organization yet. That's what we're going to talk about in this next step. And again, we have a state directory list so that we can scroll down to Hawaii. So what we want here is the articles of organization. So we're going to click this here, and then we're going to zoom in a little bit, and then we're going to just go over some of the information on here. Number one, the name of the company shall be. That's your unique name that you have. The mailing address of the initial principal offices. So where's the address? Article 3 here is the name, and then the company's registered agent in the state of Hawaii. Now, this is really important. What a registered agent is, and a lot of times they don't do the best job of explaining this, it's a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. Now, in the example of you being sued at the coffee shop, you're going to get something called a service of process notice. This is basically saying that you're being required to show up to court. Your registered agent is going to make sure you get that documentation, that you're showing up to court with all the important information that you need. The rules on the registered agent is that they must have a physical mailing address within the state of Hawaii. It cannot be a P.O. box, and you must maintain a registered agent going forward. Now, the state is not going to offer you registered agent services. If you go through the online legal tools, those LLC services, those will. And many times what you'll find is that even some of them will provide you a free registered agent for the first year, which we're going to talk about in the next video. But I just wanted you to be aware of what a registered agent is. The name and addresses of each organizer is, so the people within the LLC. The period of duration, most people it's going to be at will, which means like perpetual. If this is actually an LLC that you're setting up to close down at a particular date, you can put that in there. The company is manager managed or member managed. The easy way to think about this is a manager is a manager. A member is an owner, right? So if you are a sole proprietor that's setting up an LLC, well, you are going to be the member, all right? You probably don't have a management team in place. But if you're somebody who owns the LLC and somebody else is going to be managing it, that's where you're going to get into like the difference between manager and member. Then you're going to list those names on there. So then once you sign and fill this out, what you're going to do is you would mail this in to this address up here in Honolulu. Now, of course, you can go through the state website and you can do this through their online portal as well. But that is what actually creates the LLC for you, this articles of organization. Now, we've assigned a registered agent, you filed it and submitted the state fee. What you need to do or consider next is creating and signing an LLC operating agreement. This is not required in the state of Hawaii, but it's a really good idea to do. What an LLC operating agreement is it's a situation where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Let's say that you started a coffee shop and you ended up having 12 locations and you have a business partner. One day your business partner wants out of the LLC, or I should say out of the business. How do you handle that? Well, if you have an LLC operating agreement, it's going to list who the managers and members are, what are their roles and responsibilities. But it's also going to get into things such as like, what happens if somebody wants to exit the business? How is that handled? That's why it's really important to set up an operating agreement. These online LLC services will have boilerplate templates you can use. You can also do a Google search of that, like free LLC operating agreement. But just know it's a really good idea to set that up. It can, again, help you avoid a lot of pitfalls and heartache in the future. Because if you got to get attorneys involved for a situation like that, it's going to get real costly and real frustrating. Now, another thing to consider here is setting up an EIN. This is after you get your LLC set up. This page right here from the IRS, it explains what the employer identification number is. It's basically a social security number for your business. So when the IRS is trying to find your business, it helps them to easily identify it through this number. Now, this is important because you're going to need this if you're going to have staff on payroll. So when you have staff on payroll, you need an EIN. But if you're going to apply for a business loan, or perhaps you're applying for an office space, if you can put your EIN on that document instead of your social security number, it looks more professional. Also know that this is one of those situations where sometimes you will see EIN and TIN used interchangeably. Just know that they're the same thing here. If you want to go through the online LLC services, they will actually handle the EIN for you, or you can do it yourself through this link. Next, obtain business licenses and permits for your LLC. There's a helpful SBA resource here. You guys can click on that if you want in the document. But what I can say here is a great example of this is owning a brewery. Let's say you're starting a brewery. Well, you might be brewing beer, distributing beer, and serving beer on premise. Those three different things can require different licenses and permits, and they can happen on the federal level, the state level, and the local level. My recommendation here is you just look up your local town hall, call the town clerk, whoever you want at the town hall, and just say, hey, I'm starting XYZ business. I'm just wondering if there's any licenses and permits that are needed on the town or county level. What they'll be able to do is forward you to the right department and then help you out through that process. For the state level, you can just put in Hawaii business licenses and permits, go to the .gov website, go through the process there. And then on the federal level, you'll want to look into this as well. Now, if you're going to be selling physical products, that's where you can get into sales tax. You're going to need to register for sales tax with the state. But this is a step that a lot of people skip. And again, it can land them in a lot of hot water because you can create fines and fees down the road, or potentially even worse if they think that you've done this on purpose and not set these things up. Now, the next video, what we're going to talk about are the fees associated with setting up your LLC. We actually have a cost calculator down here. And what that's going to do is it's going to show you down to the dollar the cost of owning and operating an LLC for 5 years in your state. We have the star rating system that we're going to explain how these different paths work for you, whether you go through the state site, online tools, or a business attorney. We're talking about why the state websites can become a pain, and it has to do with domestic versus foreign LLCs. Really important concept that you should understand, what we're going to break down. And then also the questions worth asking. So we're going to deep dive on these different scenarios of like which path makes the most sense for your needs. And what I'd highly suggest here is I've seen people overspend by close to $1,500 by doing the wrong thing here. So in this next video on the screen, we're going to go through and make sure that you don't go the wrong path and that you get set up in the way that you need to. And then again, I highly suggest you get this document for yourself. There'll be a link in the description below. All right, we'll catch you in that next video.